I want to work and create and live in a world where we are phenomenal at the prevention, recovery, and repair of harm. And to do this, I draw inspiration from moments that have filled up my life. For instance, my sister and her husband were super conscientious about only serving healthy food to their first child. So my nephew was not exposed to any processed or junk food, 0 candy or sugar. And when he's around 3.5 years old, he returns from a birthday party and he marches up to his mom and he kicks her in the shin and he says, "Why didn't you tell me about ice cream?" So what does a story about ice cream have to do with responding to sexual assault? We all know what my nephew felt. When someone hasn't told you about something that exists, and we can prevent that when we let everyone know about the option of restorative justice. Restorative justice focuses on the harm that results from wrongdoing. It focuses on the impact to people and relationships who are affected by a conflict. The process is led by a facilitator who prepares each person who's going to participate. It culminates in a meeting in which a victim and an offender participate, and it's voluntary and it's safe. The process revolves around 4 questions. Describe what happened, listen to and acknowledge the impact of this incident, agree upon specific ways to address the harm that's been described, and finally, really talk about and figure out what is needed, necessary, to prevent this from ever happening again. Restorative justice invites people to really closely examine the behavior that is needed to address guilt and the support that's needed to repair harm. A person who has harmed somebody should be invited to increase their human capacity to express regret, to extend empathy, to repair the harm that they caused. These are crucial components of restorative justice. And an offender who accepts a restorative justice process is asked to face and acknowledge the life-altering trauma that they are responsible for, the sense of violation, the loss of safety and trust, the stigma of shame. And when we look at the incidence of sexual assault in this country and the parallel criminal justice outcomes, the need for restorative justice is obvious. Out of every 1,000 rapes that occur in the US, 80 to 90% involve people who know one another. A powerful combination of fear and shock and anxiety occurs immediately before, during, and after rape. And this influences whether or not someone ever discloses. Because if you're not sure what the reception will be, or if you fear that someone will blame you if you say these words, "I was raped," it impacts whether or not you ever report. That's why out of the 1,000 sexual assaults that occur, only 310 are reported to law enforcement. Less than 60 will result in an arrest. 7 will lead to a felony conviction. And you know how many will result in a prison sentence? 6 cases. So let me ask you, out of those 1,000 cases of sexual assault, how many times did the criminal justice system increase public safety, address accountability? If we listen to survivors, what they tell us is that the criminal justice system often fails to acknowledge the needs of both victims and offenders. I speak from the perspective of a victim advocate. For the last 33 years, I have listened to children and women and men describe how the trauma of sexual contact without consent unfolds over a life, when you don't feel heard, when you don't feel believed, and when no one tells you that empathy and accountability can develop out of restorative justice conversations. I need to be really clear, though. Restorative justice is not something to impose as a should on any rape victim. It is not a guarantee for healing. It's not a solution either for every case, because circumstances and significant safety concerns have to be respected. There are people who will never identify as rapists. They won't see themselves as rapists, but as opportunists. And yeah, there are rapists who show no concern and no remorse for the people they have harmed. I also speak from my own experience as a survivor of rape. When I was 23 years old, a man broke into my apartment. One moment, I was asleep. The next moment, I was tied up, gagged, blindfolded, and raped at knife point. While this was happening, the only thing that mattered was living beyond that moment. The offender in this case was ultimately arrested and charged with 4 counts of sexual battery involving 2 women, a young man, and me. This offender was sentenced to a very lengthy prison sentence. I am grateful for that moment of validation, but it wasn't enough. The definition of justice and accountability must expand beyond the courtroom. I am reaching out to the audience of greatest significance, individuals, friends, family, of those who have either been raped, accused, or convicted. People who have been ignored, silenced. Think about this. The constitutional right and the legal advice to remain silent prevents perpetrators from expressing remorse to victims. But when a perpetrator is asked, "Why did you do this to me?" Perpetrators become accountable to victims and themselves in a way that the traditional adversarial system doesn't afford. If we don't invite offenders to address harm after wrongdoing, we are creating individuals who are further disconnected from from feeling concern for other humans. I know this idea is extremely controversial, but when a perpetrator, a human, faces a victim, another human, we grow closer to understanding what rape is, why rape happens, and what is needed to repair it and prevent it. Imagine this. No, imagine this. We can build empathy and accountability in many perpetrators. How? By inviting them to become capable of alleviating harm. A person who's listening to this moment might agree to do this profoundly risky step, to agree to a restorative justice meeting, to accept responsibility, and to acknowledge the harm that they caused. I wonder how many of the estimated 30 million sexual assault survivors in this country and the people that harm them are asking, why didn't you tell me about restorative justice?